What's up, everybody? Are you ready for the biggest, most drastic change to Summoner's War since the creation of Dragons V10? That's right, I'm talking about the Wind Mystic Witch Secret Dungeon. This is phenomenal. I can't even believe they give such an OP unit to everyone in the game. That's sarcasm. That's sarcasm. Could you imagine, though, if she was the next 2A monster? Not all of them, I mean, but... Anyway, that's besides the point. This is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about, not really transmogs either, but I figured we'd glance over them while we're here. We're talking about the new dev notes. We're talking about it's basically all about RTA, but it's trying to make RTA more fair, more accessible. We'll talk about that. So we have some transmogs coming too. Phoenix Lightning Emperor. This is the first Lightning Emperor transmog. Pirate Captain Neo's an Asian Giant Warrior. I'm upset that this is not a Chef Giant Warrior with the giant meatball. I really am. But at least, hey, you know what? You know what's funny? They put Geldnir in the picture. Like, oh, guys, you can skin your Geldnir now. Great, he's going to be skinned in storage. He's going to be nice transmog for a storage unit. Anyway, moving on. So we at least have some new transmogs. Another thing to think about, every time there's these transmogs, they do change, like the animation speed changes, and you can potentially get faster dungeon runs based on the animation speed of the transmog. Just some food for thought. Trying to sell the transmogs for Comptros. I don't get any kickbacks from the amount of transmogs sold. You know what? Don't buy the transmogs. Don't, but they're garbage. Anyway, moving on. World Arena Season 12 improvements. This is basically... It impacts other stuff, but it's basically for RTA. However, like the Shockwave, I guess if you want to call it that, may impact other stuff. A lot of people already ruin their accounts for RTA anyway, and they just use their RTA units and other stuff. But it can change things a little bit. So, Violent Rune change. There's a lot of math, there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of numbers. They go through here, they talk about the different tests that they did. They were like, oh, well, we tested out one way, we tested out another way. We wanted to see what the best option would be. It kind of reminds me of, we'll talk about that in a second. But there's a change to Violent Runes. They're nerfing Violent Runes for subsequent turns. So, for example, I'm going to try to give you the short explanation of it. If your unit, well, it's kind of the regular explanation for it. If your unit Violent procs, your chance for Violent is lower until the next turn, right? Until the enemy Violent procs. So we see here, blah, blah, blah. We see all the different tests that they were trying to do. Following Violent rule will be added to the World Arena. When my monster's Violent gets activated, the Violent activation chains... This is my job, guys. When my monster's Violent gets activated, the Violent activation change of ally monsters will be decreased by 5%. So if you have, for example, a Vertiheel, Triana, and Fran on your team, and an Ajir on your team, right? Those are the units that you're using. If you're Vertiheel Violent procs, that's basically already like 9,000 turns for the rest of the team, but that's besides the point. The Violent activation rate for ally monsters will be decreased by 5%. So, if Vertiheel Violent procs, and then Ajir moves next, Ajir doesn't have a 22% chance to Violent proc anymore. Ajir has a 17% chance to Violent proc now. So it gets nerfed up to 2 times, and then it gets buffed up to 27. When the opponent gets the Violent activated, the Violent activation chance of ally monsters will be increased by 5%. So when your Vertiheel Violent procs, the enemies, so your units get decreased chance to Violent proc the next turn. Like I said, your Ajir has the less chance to Violent proc when he gets a turn. And the ally, not the ally, your opponent, as soon as your opponent gets a turn with their Yen Hong, they got an extra chance to Violent proc with that Yen Hong. See, you liked it until I said they have an extra chance to Violent proc with the Yen Hong. Then you're like, oh, I don't like this anymore. So if I get Violent proc, they get extra chance to Violent proc? Oh no, man. It is a more fair way of doing things. Devil's Advocate. Does this remind anyone else of literally something that Math Plus Games was talking about October of 2018? It's October, right? I don't know. October of 2018. He did a whole thing on this. He did a whole thing of like decreasing the chance for the next to Violent proc the next time. I mean, it balances out. It's more fair, and the battles will be less won and lost based on Violent procs. It's still Violent procs are going to definitely change the course of the battle. There's no two ways about that. But there's really not many ways to change that without completely changing Violent Runes, taking them out of the meta. Like, you can't just take everything out of the meta. If people have spent godly amounts of money, ungodly amounts of money, whatever, large amounts of money on violent runes and reaps for violent runes. I mean, that's what everyone's spending. Like, the people that are spending six figures, those in LDs is what they're spending on, right? So you can't really like take those out and say, oh, everyone that spent $100,000 in the game, you're all nerfed now. Like, okay, maybe that might piss off all your whales, so don't do that. So they're changing it to make it a little bit more fair. This is not anything that's breaking the game, but I'm just devil's advocate. This is something Math Plus Games talked about over a year ago. Could have implemented. I mean, like, they could have said, hey, that's interesting. They know who we are. They know, trust me, they know who we are. They don't like that they know who we are, but they know who we are. They could have implemented this way sooner. But it's typical summoner, it's typical Comtuous thing, like, let's wait way too long before we actually do anything about this. Maybe at some point they'll stop the whales from farming in low levels. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not even just about the Von runes. There's other stuff that there is as well. But I think the whales farming in low levels is the biggest problem they have to RTA, and that's why early and mid game players just aren't playing. It's all end game players because that's the only ones that really have any chance of enjoying. I'm gonna use that term loosely. Enjoying RTA. Because everyone else just gets smacked around by people that are clearly stronger than they are, and there's no real chance. There's like nothing they can do. They're like, well, I get out-runed, I get out-drafted with everything, and I can't, like, they can't even play at like Fighter 1 level against people at their own rank. That's the biggest problem affecting RTA, and they've just completely not addressed it. The violent runes are a problem though, so at least they're making steps in the right direction, but it's not the biggest problem. And they completely did not address the biggest problem. Moving on. Actually, this is just another clip of, where is it? Yeah, October 2018. So this is just basically the video that I was talking about. Math Plus Games was talking about this in his video. It's basically, I mean, it's kind of his idea, right? It's kind of his idea of talking about nerfing violent runes for subsequent turns. But I digress. Did I use that word right? I digest. But I digest. Let's move on. Right, so we can see that this is more balanced, violence, without completely destroying the system, because you can't really destroy the system. It just makes it more fair across both players, so that it's not entirely dominated by one side of violence. I mean, it is technically possible to still be dominated by one side of violence, it's just going to be less likely. So it's at least more fair. But again, like I said, it's not really changing what I feel needed to be changed with the whales farming at low levels. That's the biggest thing. Or the RTA rewards. Where's the RTA reward improvement? Or RTA rewards basically in general. Like, there's really not too much. There's like, you can do 3 hours of RTA and you like get like part of a scroll. Oh my goodness, 30 hours of RTA for part of a scroll. I could have just went to work for 3 hours and made enough for 15 scrolls. You know what I mean? I don't know what job you have. Listen, I don't know what job you have. Anyway, it's changing the victory points as well for like wins and losses. It's not a drastic change though. They're also changing like the amount of points that you need for Guardian. So I don't feel like this is a super drastic change though. So, or at least it doesn't seem like a super drastic change. And the cutoff point will be changed. I don't really know that impacts too much. It impacts like small amount of people. Actually, yeah, I don't know. These are I feel like they're trying to make steps, but they're not tackling like the most important things of whales farming in low levels. So, there's also this, which I think is I mean, for a lot of players, this is going to be a bigger thing. World Arena exclusive rune setting feature. So you can change the runes, and you can have runes that when you go into RTA, you can take runes that you generally use other units for. Like, for a lot of people talking about, like, they're going to put their Guild Wars stuff on their RTA units, because, like, if they really like to do Guild Wars, and they're like, I don't want to do RTA because I don't have all my RTA units runed, because I focus mostly on Guild Wars and Guild Siege, that they're going to put their Guild Wars and Guild Siege runes on their RTA. Like, they can just have that set in just RTA. Like, how do I explain it? I mean, it's right here that you can explain it. But you can take runes that you just have. You don't have to take them off something. When you go into RTA, you can say, hey, well, we'll see it when it's actually implemented in the game. But you can say, hey, this is my runes for maybe, say, a Lucian in Giant Speed 10. You don't even have to take your runes off Lucian. You can say, for RTA, I want to use my Lucian runes for Giant Speed 10 on my Odin. And then use your Odin in RTA with those Lucian runes. I mean, just giving examples. Or you can use your, like, Chandra runes for Guild Wars on... I don't know what you would use your Chandra runes on for regular RTA. I don't know. That's besides the point. The point is you can use... Or for you know what? For Antares, the Fire Lich. If you don't want to use it, right, you do mostly Guild Wars. You don't want to use Fire Lich in anything aside from RTA. There you go. You can use your Chandra runes on Antares, and you don't even have to. You don't have to spend all the mana to change the runes over. You can just say you can assign those Chandra runes from your RTA team. They don't come off Chandra. They're just being temporarily used on Antares for RTA. So it's a weird kind of like it's a weird thing to even talk about, to even think about. You're like, what? But they're just allowing you to assign runes that are already on other things to temporarily be used for RTA for different units. So at first I was like, who cares? I was reading that and I was like, who cares? Like, here's one of the things for high-level RTA, high-level RTA that also do Guild Wars and Guild Siege, generally they take their they rune their things for RTA and they just use their RTA units in Guild Wars and Guild Siege, and you do see that reflected already in like Guild Siege. You're like, oh, there's Aegir's in Guild Siege. Well, he dies easily to Copper and Lucian, but there's Aegir's in Guild Siege because a lot of people have some of their best runes on Aegir's, right? Some of the best Valorant runes on Aegir's or things like that. So you will see it actually being reflected in the Guild Siege meta because they don't do Guild Siege twice a week. They do RTA. A lot of them do RTA every day. So you already see it reflected in the meta. But now you may even see the Guild Wars and Guild Siege, less Guild Wars, but probably more Guild Siege meta, shifting away from RTA units because you're allowed to use different, like you're allowed to assign the runes temporarily to RTA units. And you know what I mean? Like, you may just see less Aegir's in Guild Siege now. You may see less things that are RTA units being used in Guild Siege because they don't have to use those runes for one monster. They can use those runes for two different monsters. They can say, okay, this is always gonna be runed for this RTA thing, and then for Guild Wars, and then for RTA, I can just use the same runes on something else. I think I just said that way too complicated, but you may actually see a change. I didn't think that this was a big deal at first, and then I was thinking about like. What I was really thinking about was my fast Swift sets, like some of the reasons that I don't have a crazy amount of super insane speed things for RTA is because I'm like, well, I don't want to take the runes off my arena offense units for RTA. And I'm thinking about it, I'm like, if I don't plan on using Kabila in RTA, I can just temporarily assign my Kabila runes for RTA to something else. So that's kind of nice to have something being used. Like, I think it makes more of an impact if you like to do arena, because then you can use both the things on both different things. So both the things on both different things. Jubego 2020. I'm glad. Oh my god, can we end the video now? Because nothing makes any sense. Moving on. So we have the rune setting feature. All of this is going to be implemented. There's going to be a test special league, like a second special league, which is going to be interesting. So you can test it out for roughly a little bit less than 2 weeks. No, January has 31 days, so roughly 2 weeks. You can test it out in normal battle special league, and then season 12 is going to open up on February 6th. So initially, like I said, I didn't think about this being too much of a deal until I thought about like my arena offense things that I never wanted de-rune, like my Tiana and my Kabila and things like that for arena offense, and now I can actually take those and I don't have to de-rune them. I can just keep them as they are and use them on different things in RTA. So I think maybe that might be more of an impact than other things. Honestly, I still feel like like I said already, I still feel like they didn't address the biggest issue. Also, shout out to Math Plus Games who came up with this idea for CompToUs team. Shout out to Math Plus Games. But I still think they didn't address the biggest issue is not allowing early to mid-game players to enjoy RTA at all. And that's how I feel about it. Like, there's just... If an early to mid-game player gets into RTA, they get smacked around by end-game players that are just camping in low ranks, and they will not really see a resurgence in RTA gameplay until they address that issue, which they seem to be just pretending doesn't exist. But that is, I think, the most frustrating thing for... Because I do try to listen to my viewers, and I think that's the most frustrating thing for why a lot of people don't play RTA. They're like, I don't want to go into a thing where I'm completely unmatched. There's someone in Fighter 1, they got like clearly Guardian Wings and a bunch of LD5s and Gani Hathor, and I'm just getting stomped in Fighter 1. I can't enjoy any level of the game. Like, I completely understand that. Like, I mean, I play on like the alts, like the little baby accounts, whatever. Some of them are different levels than others, but I understand the same frustrations because I try to put myself in you guys' shoes as well, and I'm like, yeah, it gets frustrating sometimes when you're up against someone that's clearly stronger than you, and it's like, it looks like they're Fighter 1, and they're not Fighter 1, they're Guardian level player, and it's like, oh, you lose to a Fighter 1 player, you're garbage. It's like, they're not Fighter 1! They're not a Fighter 1 player. They got Guardian Wings on everything. You tell me Fighter 1 player. So, I understand the frustration of that, and to be honest, it's a thing that makes a lot of early game players and mid game players just like that's content is not available until you reach end game. So I think it's very frustrating. Well, I know it's very frustrating for a lot of the players, and they're not going to see a big resurgence in RTA for everyone across the board until they make it accessible for all players, which they seem to still not want to do. They still don't think it's a problem, but it is. So anyway, I've rambled on for too long already. I apologize, but I wanted to talk about... I know you guys wanted me to talk about the thing. And of course I'm going to talk about it because it's a big change. But it's a change. It's a change. It's making it... It's a step in the right direction, but it's not fixing it entirely. They have to, like, really accept the problem before they can fix it. Anyway... still much work to need to be done. Anyway, that's it for this one. Sorry for talking so much. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you as always in the next one.